I accused my mom of stealing my savings, but the CCTV footage revealed something worse. I thought my mom was a thief, but the camera I planted to catch her red-handed instead exposed a secret that would shatter our entire world. Hey, everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. My name is Ryan, and I was 19 years old when the life I thought I knew began to unravel. It all started with a shoebox. Not just any shoebox, but the one I kept tucked away in the back of my closet, the one that held my entire future. Inside, nestled amongst old receipts and bank statements, was an envelope thick with cash. $8,742. Every dollar was a testament to 3 years of grueling work at the local diner, of skip parties and worn-out sneakers, of a singular, burning dream, the down payment on a reliable car to get me to the state university, a symbol of my independence. That money was my lifeline, my ticket out of our sleepy, suffocating town. And one sweltering Tuesday afternoon, it vanished. I tore my room apart, my heart hammering against my ribs with a frantic, sickening rhythm. The closet was empty, the space under my floorboards undisturbed, the shoebox itself lying on its side on my bed, as if tossed there in a casual, cruel gesture. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. My mind raced, cataloging every person who had been in the house. There was only one possibility. My mom. She'd been home all day, her presence a quiet hum in the background of my life. Lately, though, that hum had changed. There was a new tension to her shoulders, a haunted look in her eyes that she tried to hide with a weak smile. I'd overheard hushed, urgent phone calls where she'd abruptly lower her voice when I entered the room. I'd seen the unopened bills piling up on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to a struggle she never spoke of. It had to be her. Who else would it be? The thought was a poison pill burning in my gut. My own mother, the woman who had raised me alone, who had worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. How could she? The betrayal was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. That evening, I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just sat across from her at the dinner table, pushing my food around my plate, the silence between us thick and suffocating. I really watched her for the first time in years. I saw the fine lines etched around her mouth, the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. And when our eyes met, I saw not guilt, but a flicker of something else, something that looked terrifyingly like fear. She knew I knew, but she said nothing. And in that silence, my conviction hardened into a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I had to know for sure. I had to see it with my own eyes. Later that night, while she slept, I crept downstairs and retrieved the old baby monitor from the garage. I bought a tiny high-definition camera online a few months back for a school project, a cheap little thing no bigger than a thumbtack. With trembling hands, I positioned it on my bookshelf, angled perfectly at the spot where my shoebox had always been hidden. It felt dirty, underhanded, but the rage and hurt brewing inside me pushed away any sense of shame. I was no longer just her son. I was an investigator, and my mother was the prime suspect. I plugged the receiver into my laptop, the screen glowing in the darkness of my room. A portal to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I settled into my chair, my eyes fixed on the grainy image of my empty closet, and waited for the thief to reveal herself. The first night was an exercise in psychological torture. Every creak of the old house, every groan of the pipes, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I sat bathed in the cold blue light of my laptop screen, watching the ghostly, static-filled image of my closet. The world outside my window had fallen silent, but inside my head, a storm was raging. I replayed every conversation, every shared glance, searching for a clue I might have missed. Had she dropped hints? Had I been too blind, too self-absorbed to see her desperation? The hours stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Around 2 a.m, the bedroom door on my screen creaked open. My breath hitched. It was her. She moved silently, a shadow in the darkness, her silhouette illuminated by the sliver of moonlight filtering through my blinds. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation and dread. This was it. I was about to watch my mother steal from me. But she didn't go to the closet. She walked to my window, her back to the camera, and just stood there, staring out into the night. Her posture was rigid, her shoulders hunched. She looked like a soldier on watch, guarding against an unseen enemy. She remained there for what felt like an eternity, a statue of anxiety in the quiet of my room. Then, just as silently as she had entered, she turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. What was that? A feint? A trick to lull me into a false sense of security? It made no sense. The next morning, the tension at the breakfast table was a palpable thing. I watched her as she poured me a bowl of cereal, her hands trembling slightly. She wouldn't meet my gaze. Was it guilt? Or was it the same fear I had seen the night before? I replayed the footage from the night before, my eyes scanning every pixel, looking for something, anything, that would make sense of her strange behavior. There was nothing. Just a woman staring out a window, lost in some private turmoil. A part of me, a small, traitorous part of me, began to doubt my initial conviction. But the memory of the empty shoebox, the stark reality of my stolen future, was too powerful. I decided to wait one more night. I had to be sure. I had to see her reach for that hiding spot, to confirm the worst of my suspicions before I could confront her with the cold, hard truth. That second night, the wait was even more agonizing. The silence was no longer just empty. It was pregnant with possibility. I was a coiled spring, waiting for release. And then, just after midnight, I saw it. Not my door, not in the hallway, but on the monitor, a flicker of movement from the window itself. A dark shape, detaching from the shadows of the backyard. A figure, moving with a purpose that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't my mother. It was a stranger. The figure moved with a chilling confidence that defied the lateness of the hour. He didn't sneak or fumble. He walked to the side of our house, out of the camera's view, and a moment later, I heard the faint, distinct click of the back door unlocking. My blood ran cold. He had a key. My mind struggled to process this new, terrifying information. This wasn't a simple theft. This was something else entirely. My mother hadn't stolen my money. She had let a stranger into our home. My eyes were glued to the screen, my body frozen in a state of suspended horror. I watched as the man, a tall, imposing figure dressed in dark clothes, stepped into the frame of my bedroom doorway. He paused for a moment, his head swiveling as if scanning the room, his face obscured by the shadows. Then, he moved out of my line of sight. A moment later, my mother entered the room. She wasn't asleep. She was fully dressed, her face pale and set like stone. She followed the man into the living room, just beyond the camera's reach. I could only see fragments of their interaction. A gesturing hand, a rigid posture, the tense way they stood opposite each other like two gunslingers at high noon. There was no sound on the recording, but the silence was deafening. I could feel the waves of tension radiating from the glowing screen. The man's body language was aggressive, demanding. He pointed a finger at my mother, then at the wall where our family photos hung. My mother stood her ground, her head held high, but I could see the tremor in her hands. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. The man's posture grew even more menacing. He took a step closer, invading her personal space, and I felt a primal urge to leap out of my chair and rush to her defense. But I was paralyzed, a helpless spectator to a drama I couldn't begin to understand. Then, the man reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out to my mother. It was a thick, white envelope, the kind that might hold documents or cash. My mother stared at it for a long moment, her face a mask of conflict. Then, to my utter astonishment, she pushed it away. She shook her head again, more firmly this time. The man seemed to grow frustrated. He shoved the envelope back at her, his voice a low, angry rumble I couldn't decipher but could feel in my bones. He jabbed a finger at the envelope, then at her, his meaning clear, "Take it." The standoff lasted for another agonizing minute before my mother finally, reluctantly, took the envelope. She didn't open it. She just held it, her knuckles white. The man gave her one last, hard look, then turned and walked away, disappearing back into the night from which he came. The moment he was gone, my mother's strength seemed to evaporate. She sank onto the couch, her body racked with silent sobs, the white envelope clutched in her hand like a damning piece of evidence. I sat in the darkness of my room, the glowing screen illuminating my stunned face. My money was gone, my mother was involved with some dangerous man, and my entire world had just been turned upside down. This wasn't about my savings anymore. This was about a secret so deep, so dark, that my mother had been willing to risk everything to keep it hidden. The sleep that followed was a fractured, restless affair, filled with shadowy figures and silent accusations. I woke up with a start, the image of the man and the white envelope seared into my mind. The anger I had felt towards my mother had been replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Who was he? What did he want? And why did my mother have a key for him? I knew I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed answers, context, a clue to unlock the mystery that had taken root in my home. While my mother was at work the next day, I embarked on a covert investigation of my own house. I started with the obvious places: her desk, the filing cabinet in the hall, the old chest in the attic. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I would recognize it when I saw it. I found nothing but old tax returns and faded photographs of a life that seemed, in retrospect, deceptively simple. It was as I was about to give up, a wave of frustration washing over me, that I remembered the trunk at the foot of her bed. It was an old steamer trunk, covered in stickers from faraway places, a relic from a life she had lived before I was born. She always kept it locked. But now, thanks to a sleepless night of obsessive Googling, I knew how to pick a simple lock. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfyingly soft sound, and the lid creaked open. The smell of cedar and mothballs filled the air. Inside, nestled amongst old clothes and yellowed letters, was a small, leather-bound photo album. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly. The first few pages were filled with pictures of my mother as a young woman, her face bright with a hope I had rarely seen. She was with a man, tall and handsome, with a familiar, imposing stature. My heart skipped a beat. It was him, the man from the video. Younger, sure, with a full head of hair and a carefree smile, but it was undeniably him. In the photos, they were happy, arms wrapped around each other, standing in front of a small, charming house I had never seen. And then, on the third page, I saw a picture that stopped my breath. It was my mother, the man, and a little boy, no older than 5 or 6, with my mother's eyes and the man's smile. A boy I had never seen, never heard of, a boy who looked strikingly like me. I stared at the photo, my mind struggling to connect the dots. My mother had a whole other life before me, a life with this man and this little boy. I flipped through the rest of the album, but there were no more pictures of them. The album ended abruptly, as if that part of her life had been torn out. I dug deeper into the trunk, my fingers closing around a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were from the man, his handwriting a confident, looping scrawl. The first few were filled with declarations of love and dreams for the future. But as I read on, the tone changed. The letters became darker, more controlling, filled with a subtle menace that made my skin crawl. And then I found it. Tucked inside the last letter was a folded piece of paper, a legal document. It was a birth certificate for a boy named Jacob, and it listed my mother as his mother and the man from the video as his father. And next to it, a crumpled newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local boy injured in hit and run. Family seeks donations for costly surgery." The boy in the picture, his face bandaged and his eyes filled with pain, was the same boy from the photograph. It was Jacob, my brother, my half-brother, and the surgery, the article said, would cost tens of thousands of dollars. The money I had saved, the money I thought my mother had stolen, was a drop in the bucket compared to what she needed. I sank onto the floor, the documents scattered around me, the pieces of a puzzle I never knew existed clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. My mother wasn't a thief. She was a desperate mother, trying to save a son she had kept hidden from me for my entire life. The weight of the secret settled upon me, a heavy, suffocating blanket, I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the evidence of my mother's hidden life spread out on my bedroom floor. The birth certificate, the newspaper clipping, the letters, the photos. It was a lifetime of pain and sacrifice, all neatly bundled and tucked away in an old trunk. I thought about the man from the video, the way he had handed her the envelope. It wasn't a threat. It was a payment. Or maybe an installment. My mother had been trying to save her son, Jacob, all on her own, while living a double life to protect me from the darkness of her past. The anger I had felt towards her was gone, replaced by a profound, aching sense of sorrow and a grudging respect for her strength. She had carried this burden alone for years, while I had been too wrapped up in my own world to notice the depth of her struggle. That evening, when she came home, I didn't wait for her to come to me. I met her at the door, my laptop in my hand. Her eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of fear crossing her face as she saw the determined look in my eyes. I didn't say a word. I just walked into the living room, opened my laptop, and hit play. I watched her face as the video of the man's visit unfolded on the screen. I saw the shock, the denial, and then the slow, crumpling realization that her secret was out. The tears came then, not the silent, stoic tears I'd seen on a monitor, but a torrent of grief and relief that shook her entire body. She sank onto the couch, her face in her hands, and the story came pouring out of her in a torrent of words and sobs. She told me about her first marriage, to a man who had seemed charming at first, but had revealed a darker, more controlling side as the years went on. She told me about Jacob, the son she loved more than anything in the world. She told me about the night she finally found the courage to leave, taking only me, her infant son from a later relationship, and the clothes on our backs. She had left Jacob behind, a decision that had haunted her every day of her life, a sacrifice she had made to protect me from a man she knew would never let us go. She had kept in touch with Jacob over the years, secret meetings and hush phone calls, a desperate attempt to be a part of his life without putting him in danger. And then, the accident. The hit and run that had left Jacob with a shattered leg and a mountain of medical bills. The man from the video, Jacob's father, had agreed to help, but at a price. He had used her desperation to control her, to keep her tethered to a past she had tried so hard to escape. The envelope he had given her was a partial payment for Jacob's surgery, a down payment on her son's future. And my money? She confessed, her voice barely a whisper, that she had considered taking it. She had been so desperate, so close to her goal, that the thought had crossed her mind. But she couldn't do it. She had been planning to talk to me that night, to tell me everything, to beg for my help. But before she could find the words, I had accused her with my silence, and she had clammed up, ashamed and afraid. My money, it turned out, had been lost in a freak accident. A pipe had burst in the attic, and the water had leaked through the floor, soaking the shoebox and destroying the cash. She had found the ruined money that morning and had been trying to figure out how to tell me, how to explain her own desperation when I had confronted her with the video. I looked at my mother, her face streaked with tears, her shoulders slumped under the weight of a lifetime of secrets, and I saw her not as a liar or a thief, but as a hero. A woman who had sacrificed everything for her children, who had fought against impossible odds to keep her family together, even when it was torn in two. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. The decision was surprisingly easy. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it all melted away, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. The money, my car, my dreams of independence, they all seemed trivial in the face of my mother's sacrifice and my brother's suffering. I reached out and took my mother's hand, her cold, trembling fingers clutching mine. I told her we would figure it out together. The relief that washed over her face was a balm to my own wounded soul. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking for the first time in years. We pored over the medical bills, the hospital records, the correspondence with Jacob's doctors. The total cost of the surgery was staggering, a number that made my $8,000 seem like pocket change. But it was a start. It was a foundation. The next day, we made a plan. We wouldn't give the money to Jacob's father. We would cut him out of the equation, severing the toxic tie that had bound my mother for so long. We contacted the hospital directly, arranging to make a payment towards Jacob's surgery. It was a small step, but it was a step taken on our own terms, a declaration of our independence from the man who had held my mother's past hostage. In the weeks that followed, I watched my mother transform. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a cautious, fragile hope. The tension in her shoulders eased, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her smile, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. We became a team, a united front against the world. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, and she took on a part-time job in the evenings. We saved every penny, our shared goal a powerful motivator. And we talked to Jacob. Through a series of carefully orchestrated video calls, I got to know the brother I had never known. He was a bright, resilient kid, with my mother's eyes and a quiet strength that belied his years. We talked about everything and nothing, about video games and music, about school and dreams for the future. It was a strange, wonderful, and heartbreaking connection, a bond forged across a chasm of secrets and years. The day we finally paid off the balance for Jacob's surgery was a day of quiet celebration. There were no balloons or confetti, just a shared glance between my mother and me, a silent acknowledgement of the mountain we had climbed together. A few weeks later, we got the news. The surgery was a success. Jacob was on his way to a full recovery. My mother wept, tears of joy and relief this time, and I held her, feeling a sense of peace I had never known. My savings were gone. My dream of a car was on hold, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had a brother. I had a mother who was no longer a stranger to me. And I had a family, whole and imperfect, but stronger than ever before. Looking back, I realized that the day I found my shoebox empty was the day my life truly began. It was the day I stopped being a child and started to see my mother as a person, with a past as complex and painful as anyone's. The stolen money was a catalyst, a key that unlocked a door I never knew existed, a door that led to a hidden part of my family and a deeper understanding of the woman who had raised me. We never heard from Jacob's father again. The final payment to the hospital, made without his involvement, seemed to sever the last of his control over my mother's life. We were free. Jacob and I continue to talk, our bond growing stronger with each conversation. He's planning to visit next summer, and I'm already counting the days. I'm still working at the diner, still saving my money. But my dream has changed. It's no longer about a car or a ticket out of town. It's about a future that includes my newfound brother. A future where my mother no longer has to carry her secrets alone. Sometimes, I'll catch my mother looking at me, a soft, knowing smile on her face. It's a smile of gratitude, of love, of relief. And I'll smile back, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we've taken together. The story I thought I was living, the one where I was the victim of a theft, was a fiction. The real story, the one I discovered through a tiny, hidden camera, was a story of sacrifice, of secrets, and of the unbreakable bond between a mother and her sons. I lost my savings, but I found my family. And I wouldn't trade that for all the money in the world.